Hello everyone, welcome to the Mash&Drum Whiskey Room and What's on the Shelf Wednesday. In this series, I'll be doing quick reviews of whiskeys that you could find on the shelf, including bourbons, rye, Irish whiskeys, and scotch. So what's on the shelf today? Something you could always find on the shelf, Maker's Mark. Bill Samuels Sr.'s quest to create Maker's Mark began with his only copy of the family's trusted 170-year-old recipe, the one the sixth-generation distiller promptly set on fire. After accidentally burning a set of drapes in the process, Bill experimented with different flavoring grains, searching for a mash bill all his own. Now, to save years of aging time, Bill baked several loaves of bread with various grain combinations instead of distilling them. His quick thinking not only saved time, but also led him to swap out the traditional rye grain that is commonly used in bourbons for soft red winter wheat. This replaced the hot bite of rye with the wheat that Makers is known for today. Bill not only reinvented the family whiskey, he and his collaborator Margie also revolutionized the industry. The flavor of Maker's Mark stood out from the crowd, so co-founder Margie Samuels wanted to ensure the bottle did the same on store shelves. So it's said that Margie is the reason most folks buy their first bottle of Maker's Mark, and Bill is the reason they buy their second. The shape of the bottle, look of the label, signature red wax topper, and even the name itself are all thanks to Margie Samuels. Margie Samuels is the first woman inducted into the Kentucky Bourbon Hall of Fame and was the one that hand-dipped the first bottles in her kitchen using a home fryer to melt the wax. Now, while every sip of Maker's tastes just like the one before it, no two bottles are exactly alike. That dripping red wax gave Maker's Mark its unique look. When the son of Bill and Margie took over as president in 1975, his father's only words of advice to Bill Samuels Jr. were, "Don't screw up the whiskey." Bill Jr. had honored that wish while displaying a flair for innovation, just like his parents. He created a first-of-its-kind ambassador program that allows Maker's Mark's biggest fans to feel like part of the family. And like his father, Bill Jr. made his mark on the family legacy and the bourbon category itself in 2010 with Maker's Mark 46, the brand's first new major product in 50 years. So that brings us to today's reviews for Maker's Mark, Maker's Mark 46, and Maker's Mark Cask Strength. First, let's get into the Maker's Mark. Maker's Mark bourbon is a wheated bourbon made with a mash bill recipe of 70% corn, 16% red winter wheat, and 14% malted barley. Maker's Mark is aged in char No. 3 new American oak barrels for about 6 to 7 years. It is bottled at 90 proof and available for around $30. All right, guys, so let's start with the Maker's Mark first. As you know, Maker's Mark is literally one of the most widely available bourbons on the shelf today. For a lot of people, it's a great starter bourbon. It gets people into the bourbon category. It's very sweet. It's very easy to sip. So I felt like I wanted to explore all three of the expressions that you mostly see on the shelf today. So let's get into the Maker's Mark first. So the regular Maker's Mark on the nose, it's very sweet up front. It's very vanilla forward. Little hint of caramel. You get a little hint of oak there too. Yeah, sometimes wheated bourbons for me can either be really fruity or sometimes veer towards an apple note, and Maker's Mark for me definitely brings the apple a little bit more forward. There is some spice in there too, which I like. It's kind of surprising. A wheated bourbon, sometimes you don't get that nice spice to it, but this you get a nice spicy oak character on the nose as well. It's not an overly complex nose, but the flavors that you get in here, they're very sweet, they're very pleasing. It definitely kind of calls to a sweeter, a little bit of a spicy profile. So let's go for a sip of this one. Here we go. Wow, so you can really taste the wheat in here. It's a very soft, very cereal-like quality to it. A lot of vanilla, a little more of a light caramel there, also on the palate. Let's go for another sip. I'm surprised how much of a little bit of a spice I'm getting here on the very back end. There's this minty pepperiness a little bit that's hanging around the back end. It's not often that I drink Maker's Mark neat. Usually when I go to either gatherings or family functions or parties, Maker's Mark is usually the mixer bourbon. Some people do drink it straight as well, but when you have it straight, you do realize that there is some nuance here. There is a little bit of wheat that goes with that peppery spice, kind of balances out nicely with the sweet flavors. Go for one more sip here. Yeah, so the third sip really flattened all the flavors out. The vanilla is still there, the caramel is still there. That little bit of a minty, kind of a bitter note I'm getting on the back end. I don't know if it's a bitter chocolate or a mint, a spice. It's way more spicy on the finish than I thought it was gonna be, especially for a wheated bourbon. But once you get to about the third sip, the spice kind of goes away a little bit, and now you're just left with a nice easy sipper, vanilla, caramel, a little bit of that spice, a little bit of that bitterness on the back end, but generally a pretty good bourbon. All right, so let's go to the Maker's 46 next. This was launched in 2010. Maker's Mark 46 is made by taking fully matured Maker's Mark bourbon at cask strength and inserting specially seared French oak staves into the barrels. The bourbon finishes aging for a few months before bottling. The French oak staves selected from the Independent Stave Company, which is Maker's Mark's longtime cooperage, were named Stave Profile number 46. This was the first brand extension from the distillery since 1953 and was the first in the wood finishing series. This is about 6 years old, bottled at 90 proof and priced at about 40 bucks. All right, so let's get into the 46 here. So the 46 in comparison is way more interesting on the nose. This is very light, very sweet, very, very vanilla. This is chocolate, cinnamon. Yeah, there's like a raw cocoa powder type aspect to it, I think, from those French oak staves. Just really imparts way more of an interesting flavor. Getting a hint of a dark fruit here. I think it might be a raisin or a plum, maybe like a raspberry. There is a dark fruit in there, kind of hanging on. You do get a little bit of that apple note in there as well. Yeah, you get that spicy oak characteristic in there from the French oak. If you've watched my channel, you know I'm a big French oak fan. Any bourbons or whiskeys that are finished in French oak, I tend to lean towards. I love that spiciness and that fruitiness and the chocolatey type of aspect it gives to the whiskey. Yeah, this is way more interesting on the nose. So let's go for a sip of this one. Here we go. Wow, this is just vanilla and spice all the way through. This is like if you took a vanilla cake, like Angel's Food Cake, and inside it you just put a bunch of cinnamon, some black pepper, maybe a little bit of nutmeg in there too. There's a lot of baking spice going on, but it's all wrapped around this beautiful velvety vanilla type flavor that you get. Let's go for another sip. All right, so on the second sip, it got a little bit more interesting. Now the chocolate and the fruit that I was getting on the nose is starting to come through a little bit. Again, the finish on this is not very long, but you do get a little bit more of a baking spice flavor profile, a little bit more on the finish than you were getting on the regular Maker's Mark. It's just way more of an interesting flavor profile on the 46 as opposed to the regular Maker's Mark. Let's go for one last sip of this one. All right, so that third sip, I'm starting to pick up that same little bit of slight bitterness I was getting in the regular Maker's Mark. But this one is way more pleasing because it's coming through as more as a bitter chocolate note rather than an oaky bitterness. There's a spice that's involved in here, the creamy vanilla. And now the fruit is starting to come through as well, especially on the finish. That note I was picking up in the glass when I was saying it might have been like a raspberry or a plum or something like that. It's definitely coming through on the back end as well. Yeah, what they're doing in the wood finishing series and what they did with the French oak stave just gives us a way more interesting, rounded, complex flavor profile than the regular Makers. All right, so let's try the Maker's Mark Cask Strength now. Now, Maker's Mark Cask Strength is a blend of up to 19 different barrels with varying proofs and ages, which can vary the strength at bottling. It is made from the traditional Maker's Mark corn, red, winter, wheat, and barley mash bill, and priced around 55 bucks. All right, so let's go into the Maker's Mark Cask Strength. Now, with all the great cask strength bourbons that are on the market today, this one is very rarely talked about. So let's go into the nose and see how this one goes. This one's a lot softer on the nose than I thought it was gonna be. The wheat really comes through. There's almost like a fresh hay type aspect to it. Getting a hint of a banana in this one. I'm getting that apple note I was getting on regular Makers, but it's coming through a little bit more on the cask strength. Just so you guys know, this one came in at 111.5 proof. So it's not too overly high, but definitely way more powerful than the 90 proof that we had here. So let's go for a sip. Here we go. Yeah, that one actually hit the palate way harder than I thought it was gonna be when compared to the nose. The nose came off a lot softer. The palate was just a lot of fruit, a lot of vanilla, more of that hay characteristic. It's getting a little bit more citrusy though for me than dark fruits like I was getting on the Maker's 46. Let's go for another sip. Oh yeah, this one's coming through way more fruity. I just got a big burst of peach on this. A lot of peaches, maybe apricots, some stone fruit aspects there. That's what I expected a little bit more in the regular makers. I thought this would come through a little bit more fruity, but I'm getting all the fruit from the cask strength. Let's go for one more sip of this one. Wow, that third sip got really fruity. I like how fruity the cask strength is getting. Again, that first sip was very powerful. Did not expect it compared to the nose. It smelled very soft on the nose, but the amount of citrus fruits and apricot and peach I'm getting on this particular bottle is really incredible. It's really delicious. It doesn't have a super long finish either. I think it would if you haven't had these two beforehand when you compare. It definitely has this is more of a medium finish at that 111.8 proof. Very good mouth coating. Go one more sip on this one. Yeah, so what you get in this one is you get the spice and the vanilla that you get in the regular makers. There's a little bit of that spice note to it. There's a little bit of that bitter type spearminty finish there on the back end. But what you're getting here is a little bit more of a fruit characteristic, the peach, the apricot. A little bit of honey comes through now, almost like apricots drizzled in honey or something like that. It's really good. So if you compare this to other barrel-proof bourbons on the market, like Stag Jr. or Elijah Craig barrel-proof, or even Old Ezra, if you don't want something that's so caramel, vanilla, so oak heavy, if you want something a little bit more fresh and fruity that at a higher proof, I think that the Maker's cask strength could do that for you. But my favorite out of all three is easily the Maker's 46. This has the most rounded flavor profile, the most interesting, the most nuanced. I love the balance of chocolate, mint, spice, a little bit of that fruitiness character comes through. So for my money at 40 bucks, if I'm gonna get a Maker's, it's definitely the 46. All right, guys, well, I hope you enjoyed this review for Maker's Mark, the core lineup here, the three that you always find on the shelf. If you did, hit that subscribe button below. Please hit that like button. If you haven't yet, find me on Instagram and find me on Twitter. Let me know what favorite of yours is of these three, if you don't like Makers at all, if you do really like Makers. And as I always say, it's not about the whiskey, it's the people you share it with. I'll see you next time on The Mash and Drum. Cheers.